forgot to grab it. Hey.
Welcome to a Monday edition of Beyond the Arc. I'm John Gonzalez alongside our NBA insider, Bill Ryder, who is back from New York. He's in LA. He's got a haircut. He's streamlined.
I'm back.
Looking good, feeling good.
Looking good. I got my Barcelona shirt, even though they now suck. Right? Like, let's go. How you doing, John? Good to be back on the West Coast.
Yes, I have questions for you, up to and including you. Did you actually attend the Orlando-Brooklyn game?
I did. I went. I said hi to some people. I did not stay for the entire game because I had to go to a dinner. Okay. And it was everything that you would think and more. I will say this. I'm sure you've been there. It's such a great arena.
Great building.
Oh, my God. And there's nobody there. I mean, I was talking to everyone goes to Knicks. I mean, media, but that too. Everyone just goes to the Knicks games, right? Even though the Knicks are a disaster in the elevator and you can't. So you see a GM, a former GM, a scout, and you get it's just all the time in the world. I mean, honestly, it's like, do you want to come home with me and just drive home and we could have dinner at my house when we're done? Because they're just lonely for attention. So it was great. It was an excellent trip.
It was what you predicted too. It was a rock fight of a game, but Orlando just keeps churning them out, Bill. They've won 6 in a row. Not going to get into Orlando and Nets talk today. Later in the show, we'll do Weekend Radar and we'll do our team of the night. But first, there were 2 big games, 2 very good games yesterday in the NBA. We had the battle of the 2 best teams in the East and the 2 best teams in the West on Sunday. We'll start in the East. Celtics at the Cavs. As we know, in the first meeting, the Celtics ended up beating the Cavs. This time around, Cavs got the better of the Celtics. They win by 4. They tie the season series at 1-1. Cavs stay up in the Eastern Conference, Bill. They're a game and a half up in the East. They kind of needed this one. They had lost 2 in a row, and they had a huge fourth quarter. Donovan Mitchell went off. He only had 5 points at the half, ended up with 20 in the fourth, finished with 35, and he hit the last 2 free throws to ice it away. After the first one, we said, it was a good loss by the Cavs. This was a good win.
Yeah, it was a great win. And not only does just the victory, I think, in a vacuum confirm that they're good enough to compete against Boston. I think we talked about this when they lost to the Celtics, but had a nice comeback that came up a little short. They look like a team that maybe wouldn't win a 7-game series against the Celtics, but could certainly push them and belong in that kind of series. If it was an Eastern Conference Finals, you like to see a comeback that works out the right way. You like to see a bunch of offense at the end of the game. And I think it underscores that what Kenny Atkinson has done, and we've discussed this, they are basically the same team defensively this year they were last year. It's almost exactly the same if you get into the analytics. They're markedly better offensively, and to see that offensive outpouring at the end of the game under pressure against, of all teams, the Celtics, for me, the takeaway was, okay, Cleveland's offense is legit. What Kenny Atkinson has done with this offense to make it really competitive and one of the better offenses in the NBA is real. And to do it against the Celtics, a really great defensive team, just showcases that I think that the Cleveland we were hoping was real when they were undefeated and lost to Boston initially, that team is who they are. Not an 80-win team, but a team that's good enough to be one of the 3, 4, 5 best teams in the NBA, and I think push Boston if and when they play each other in the playoffs.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I wanted to see from Cleveland in this game. I wanted to see Donovan Mitchell really take over. He did, especially coming out of the first half where he didn't look great. And I was like, okay, well, look, if the Cavs are going to get into this thing, you're going to really need an effort from Donovan Mitchell. And you did. In the second half, he was absolutely unbelievable. He took over. And then Darius Garland, he was horrendous in that first game, as you remember.
He was awful.
Could not hit a shot. And then last night, much better. Bounced back, 22 points, 8 assists. Looked like the Darius Garland that we've seen for much of the season. I thought that was really important. Now, we should mention the Celtics were a little undermanned yesterday. No Derek White, no Jaylen Brown. I think it's also interesting, Bill, that we keep framing this as, look, the Celtics have been the Cavs rather have been the best team in the NBA this season. They have the best record in the NBA. They've led the Eastern Conference all season long, but we keep framing this as, can the Cavs hang with the Celtics? Right? I mean, it's still through the prism of, to be the champs, you got to beat the champs. Yesterday they beat the champs, but are we still a little hesitant on the Cavs? Because we keep talking about this as, maybe they can push the Celtics moving forward rather than saying, hey, no, they're legit. They're right there.
So I think the first step is for Cleveland to establish that they are the second best team in the NBA, because we've seen the best teams in conferences before not win an NBA championship or make a finals because of injuries. I'm thinking of that Warriors team that lost to Toronto, and even that Toronto team got lucky along the way to make that final. So for me, the goal for Cleveland is really to establish that they can compete against Boston, which I think they showed. Doesn't mean they have to be Boston just yet, and to have some separation between themselves and the people beneath them. And I know Milwaukee's won a bunch of games. They're not at that level. And I'll hit them later in Weekend Radar. Orlando's won games in a row. You noted they're not at that level. The Knicks, I don't think, are at that level. So no, I'm here for giving Cleveland all the credit that they deserve, because I think right now the goal is not to unquestionably be the best team in the East. It's to be the second best team in the East and show. And producer Aaron just pointed this out, that they're not afraid of the Celtics, which I think they did. And also, you bring up Donovan Mitchell. It's such a good point. Donovan Mitchell in Utah had some series where people questioned whether he was capable of playing great in the playoffs. He's also had huge games in the playoffs, so it's sort of there was a gulf there. And I know that he's had time with Cleveland. They've made the postseason. But this is, I think, the first time that Donovan Mitchell's been on a team where you look at that team and you say they're actually good enough to do damage. Like, he now has a group around him that should be a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense when we get to the playoffs. And his ability to play the way that he did last night and just to take over games, I think Cleveland can actually maybe be better, even better than we think. And we think they're pretty good when we get to the playoffs. If you're a believer in Donovan Mitchell's ability to win, I think that guy can win you 2 games on his own. He's literally capable of scoring 53 points in a playoff game. And so I don't think they're above Boston yet, but there's a lot of reasons I really like Cleveland as a team that, say, is in that second tier. Like, it's Oklahoma City and it's Boston for me if we're doing over the course of the whole season. But if you come up with the next tier across the whole NBA, East and West, that's 2 or 3 or 4 other teams, I'm very confident now putting Cleveland in that tier.
Yeah, and it is important to say that, the Cavs showed up and they didn't look scared of the Celtics at all. They didn't look scared of them in the first game. They were down 26 in that first game, and they cut it to 5 different times
in the first quarter, right? They were scared early and they shook it off, and they've been fearless since then. Yeah.
And I also wanted to point out that the Celtics, they did play, despite not having Derek White and Jaylen Brown yesterday, it was still a very Celtics-y game. They put up 49 3-pointers. It's not like they weren't playing their game. Now they only made 7. I'm doing air quotes on that. Only made 17, so just about league average from 3 on that, a little under 35%. But that's a really good example of when the Celtics aren't absolutely tearing it up from 3. They're still going to get them up, but when they aren't falling at, like, say, a 40% clip, they become beatable. That's their game. You know what they're going to do. And if they're not hitting, somewhere around 40%, then all of a sudden they're gettable, and they were gettable yesterday. But yes, the takeaway from this for me, if I'm the Cavs, is, hey, we've seen them twice now, and we're still in first place. We're a game and a half up on them. We lost 2 games in a row. One of them was the Atlanta Hawks, who, by the way, we're going to talk a little bit about NBA Cup a little bit later. That wraps up tomorrow. The Atlanta Hawks have qualified for the elimination.
I know. God, I don't want the Atlanta Hawks in that thing, man.
Well, they're already in, so
don't do it.
But if you're the Cavs and you stumble a little bit going into that, that's just such an important win to right yourself and go, no, we're okay. What you've seen from us this season has been largely true, and we're going to show the Celtics that.
43 fourth quarter points, whoever's missing against the Boston Celtics, to your point, is such a statement to yourselves if you're the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Yeah, and the Celtics are so deep that, yes, they were missing 2 of their top guys. They're still an unbelievable basketball team, even when they've got guys out. We mentioned, so you had that clash in the Eastern Conference. Western Conference, we had OKC at the Rockets, and Bill,
they like each other.
That was a fun game. The Rockets ended up winning this by 3. The Rockets are now second in the NBA, Bill, and just a half game out of first. Fred VanVleet went off yesterday. I mean, look, we said that the Rockets were on the come. I'm really surprised, though. I think they're way ahead of the curve here. I did not expect them to be a half game out of first place in the beginning of December.
It's amazing. And I want to hit this in the Weekend Radar earlier, but you've got the Spurs, who are way ahead of schedule, that look competitive, and the Rockets are ahead of schedule and look like one of the best teams in the NBA. And I'm not sure over 82 games I'm willing to go there on Houston, but after last night, I don't know. Am I supposed to? I'm not sure what to make of this team, because we're enough games into the season. This isn't the 12th game, right? We have a big enough sample size that this sort of feels like who they are. And you beat a team like the Thunder. You play that kind of a game. You have a little bit of bad blood and a little bit of a fracas, right? And it doesn't, and you're able to sort of see that through. And I'm skeptical the Rockets are this good, and it feels like one of these teams, because we've seen this before. Teams that get hot are really good into January and then sort of trail off. But you've been singing their praises forever. I'll defer to you. Are they a top, let me go really conservative. Are they a top 4 team in the Western Conference? Are you buying that?
I think so. Yes. Here's what I am buying. I'm buying the defense. Those are the top 2 defenses in the NBA that played each other yesterday. I mean, and it was a little bit of a slog in the fourth quarter where they were like really making each other work pretty hard down the stretch there. I am absolutely a believer in the Rockets defense because they can throw so many different looks at you. I mean, OKC's defense is legit. I think we all buy them. But the Rockets, sometimes they can be a little bit offensively challenged. Jalen Green has had moments where he's really helped. Fred VanVleet yesterday was the guy who goes for 38, and he hits 13 of his 14 free throws, including the final 4 free throws to ice it away. But offensively, they can get a little bit into the mud. Defensively, Bill, yeah, man, legit.
And that's an Ime Udoka thing. And by the way, I brought this up with you last week or the week before, and I know that the sort of momentum is to Kenny Atkinson. It should be. Don't lose track of Ime Udoka as a potential dark horse coach of the year candidate, which we talked about last week, just because if Cleveland finishes second and the Rockets finish second in their respective conferences, doesn't the momentum shift to Ime? Because that nobody saw that coming. And that defensive effort and that energy, he preached it in Boston. He has preached it here. And to get guys in the NBA to play defense and to get young guys to play defense and buy in, I mean, it is the requirement to succeed in the NBA, but it is easier said than done, especially with young players. And you're right, because their defense is incredible, and every single one of those guys buys into that.
I wrote that down. We talk a lot of basketball together, so we're sharing one basketball brain, but I wrote it down like Ime Udoka, COY, Kenny Atkinson, ? As in my shorthand. Like, it's starting to feel like that. You had mentioned when we were talking at the beginning of the show about the top 2 teams in the NBA being OKC and the Celtics, and then, where does that slot the Cavs? Like, yeah, I think they're right there with that Rockets group in the Western. And then, we're going to get into the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies are on the come. We talked about their point differential indicating that they're a better team that had otherwise indicated in the standings. Now, all of a sudden, they're third in the Western Conference. But that game yesterday was highly entertaining. I don't know if you saw at the end when Dillon Brooks got into a little jump ball scrum with SGA, and those 2 guys are I mean, look, everybody hates Dillon Brooks except evidently for SGA because they're friends, and like they were on the Canadian national team together, and they got into a little scrum where they were it ended up being a jump ball, but they were wrestling for the ball, and SGA was kind of like yelling at him.
Right.
Is he like the only guy in the NBA who actually kind of likes Dillon Brooks?
It was kind of nice to see Dillon Brooks have a friend, wasn't it? Like that kid at school. It's like,
play on his team. Yeah.
Right. I mean, as you noted, they share a national team friendship, and I guess Canadians have to stick together. Yeah. Normally I'm just used to guys wanting to headbutt him when they're having those moments. So that was a nice little change.
This, I think, was a bigger, I think we learned more about the Rockets in this one than we did with OKC, because OKC, that was the back end of a 4-game road trip. They won the previous 3 games. They won the Kings, Warriors, and Lakers. They almost won the Rockets game. I think we know that the Thunder are a really good team, but this is one of those situations where, hey, the Rockets won that game at home against the best team in the Western Conference, one of the best teams in the NBA, and kind of made everybody who maybe hasn't been paying attention to them sit up and pay attention. That's one of those things hey, we're here.
I think it's an important point because you can't overreact to single games in the NBA too much. The context matters. The takeaway isn't you're worried about Boston or you're worried about the Thunder, or it diminishes any of the excellence and sort of they are the front runners in their respective conferences. You're right. The takeaway is it confirms what we thought about Cleveland and maybe showcases what a lot of us, myself included, remain skeptical about with the Rockets, which is those 2 teams able to win those games in the fashion that they did. A dogfight for Houston and a comeback for Cleveland means, yes, they are in that class. They're in that second tier, wherever you want to put them. And we're a long ways from this. But when you are able to be close behind the leaders in the NBA, sometimes injuries or momentum get you. You can win those series. It doesn't mean you're the favorite, but it happens. Fun
season for the Rockets, who, by the way, also won Group A in the Cup. They're marching on too, so they're alive, and we'll see how they can do.
I'm going to Vegas. I'll take the Rockets, but I'm going to feel bad spending, CBS's money if it's Atlanta.
The Rockets, Atlanta, and unless Orlando loses by 1,000 points,
I know
they're moving on too. So you got some interesting teams in this one.
It's gonna be something.
You're gonna be in Vegas. You're gonna have a good time. We're gonna take a quick break, and then as we do on Monday, we'll tell you what is on our weekend radar from this past weekend, including Bill, danger time for the Wolves. We'll get into that on the other side. This is Beyond the Arc.
If you love football, this is the best time of the year.
This is as big as it gets.
The stuff of absolute dreams.
All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc. Just a reminder, you can get us wherever you get your favorite podcast. Please download, subscribe, and leave a review. All right, on Monday, we get into our weekend radar. What's on our radar from this past weekend? I'm going to start with this one, Bill, because I was desperate to talk to you about this. The Wolves beat the Clips over the weekend. They really needed it. They needed that W. And it was a good one because the Clips are a pretty good team. They won last night against Denver. We'll get into that a little bit later. But the Wolves had previously lost 4 in a row. Bill, at present, they are 9-10. They are 9th in defensive rating, so they've improved a little bit there. They're 18th in offensive rating. After they lost to the Kings on Thanksgiving Eve, Anthony Edwards just kind of went crazy.
He went rogue.
He went rogue. He called the team trash. He said he feels like the team is growing apart. They can't talk to each other. He's not singling out newbies, but he said everybody has their own agenda. He said the fans booing us, that bleep was crazy. We're getting booed in our home arena. That's so bleeping disrespectful. It's crazy. Called the Wolves front runners who are not even happy for each other out there. The vibes could not be worse here.
I mean, yeah. So my main takeaway from his comment, but all right, first of all, as what we do for a living, we love the candor. Like, it's not necessarily good for the team, but we love it. To me, the takeaway is something that I was worried about, and I think we discussed over the summer. We know what Anthony Edwards is as a talent. We know what he is as an emerging talent. We saw last year him really put that team on his back and carry them to where they finished. And there was a stretch when Cat was there where he was out and Anthony Edwards was great. But I was a little worried about the maturity level and the leadership. Like, there were expectations for the Timberwolves to be great this year. That was the expectation coming in. And especially with Karl Anthony Towns gone. But either way, it's the Anthony Edwards team and you have to lead. And there were some moments at the Olympics and there were some moments just, where he said, what did he say? I'm going to misquote him. He said, like, the old guys back in the day weren't as good as these guys, right? And he offended all the old heads. Him going out there and calling out his guys doesn't feel like a strategic LeBron James move to try to motivate these guys. It just seems like a young, immature dude who's complaining about everybody on his team and not being part of the solution, is being part of the problem. So I'm sure everything he's saying is true. I just worry that their best player, who has to be their leader, who just aired all their dirty laundry, is not at a point yet where he's going to be capable of making it right in that locker room. That's as big a problem as how they're playing for me.
Yeah, I think the framing, the delivery of the message probably wasn't the best, but I think the message is important here. And I think he is looking at this and going, I'm really frustrated by what I'm seeing from my teammates. He called them soft. He said not towards other teams, but internally, that like when they can't communicate with each other, thinking back to what happened between Rudy Gobert and Julius Randle in Toronto, where Julius Randle was doing his ISO dribble the air out of the ball thing and wouldn't pass it to Rudy. And Rudy pouted so hard he got a 3-second violation.
Lost the game.
Lost the game. And so Ant is talking about how he called them babies and said that they don't talk to each other at all after this stuff, that they're also super sensitive. That part, I think, maybe he could have done a better job explaining that or getting the message out there. But him signaling that, I think, is important. And it's also not only just important, but super worrisome. If you're Chris Finch, I don't know how you fix that. I don't know how you fix a bunch of personalities who aren't really meshing together.
Well, especially, look, if your teammates are soft and they can't take criticism internally, what makes Anthony Edwards think that they're going to respond well to him going in front of a bunch of reporters and being like, these dudes are soft? It's just, no, it's a disaster. I'm glad he told us so we can talk about it, because at the end of the day, it's not my job or your job to make sure the Timberwolves live up to their expectations. So it's cool to see the car wreck, but it is not helping. I don't think there's a lot of issues there, but I'm not sure Anthony Edwards is up to he's still a young dude of being the guy that kind of pulls everybody together. It's like, let's make this work. Obviously.
This is DEFCON. I'm always bad at this. I don't remember if it's
DEFCON 1. The lower you go, the worse it is.
The lower, it's real close to 1 then.
Okay.
It's not good. Like when I saw those comments, I was like, oh my God, I wish we had a show tomorrow. Like this is, and it's held. It's been a big topic for days now, and they have the Lakers tonight. That's obviously a big game. They're all big games for the Wolves right now. Before we move on from this one, they are outside of the play-in looking in. Yes. They're 9-10. They are a game and a half back of the Spurs for that final spot. The longer, it's still early, but not that early. the longer this goes, the more concerning it would be for the Wolves. Like, what chance do you give them of missing even the play-in?
All right, so I'm looking at the standings now. I don't think that they're going to miss the play-in. I think
Who's fallen out from that group?
Yeah,
because I know you said you were like kind of lukewarm on the Clippers. They've got to leapfrog the Spurs, Nuggets, Suns, Clippers, one of those teams.
So I think the Spurs is the answer. I think that's the. I mean, look, I was here for the Spurs would compete for a play-in and make it interesting down the stretch. I didn't think they'd be 11-9. They're actually they're on my weekend radar too. We can just throw them into this conference. Like Wemby, I'm sure you saw this, was 34, 14, 11, 3 blocks. He made 5 threes. I mean, they're not just winning. This guy is at times single-handedly winning them basketball games. And at 11-9, they're a playoff team right now. They're a play-in team. I think it's the Spurs who fall out, or maybe the Clippers. Oh, that's also on my weekend radar. Are the Clippers good? Question mark. Do I owe them an apology? Question mark. Question mark.
They are good.
I think they are. You said this early, and I've heard it from other people, including a few GMs. Like they play hard, right? And
play hard.
I thought maybe that would. I was talking to somebody last week, a GM of a bad basketball team that I got on the phone who had done pretty well, and he said, "Look, sometimes teams that have that know they're not going to be good come in much more conditioned." Because that's all they can work on. So they have a really good camp and they're pissed off. Everyone thinks they suck. And a lot of these teams, including maybe like the Clippers, have something to prove. And then the conditioning, he said, of the rest of the NBA catches up and overpasses them. That advantage they had early on, just it doesn't work. So I was sort of waiting for that to click for the Clippers, but maybe because they do play hard and they look like that. They just look at a different speed than a lot of teams they played early on. They're good. I don't know what to say.
They make other teams work. They're 4th in defense. I mean, that's something. Look, James Harden doing his James Harden act. Last night he almost had a triple-double against the Nugs, and he loves to be the main guy.
He's the offense.
It's one, and then Norm Powell being 1A, but the rest of the team just knows. Oh, we have to play defense and get rebounds and like make the right pass and make the other team really work on offense, and they do that, and they give themselves a chance to win because of that. And the Intuit Dome, as you know, my favorite venue ever, all of a sudden they've won 8 in a row there. What?
By the way, the Clippers are really, really good. They lose 3 games. They lose 3 games in a row. All of a sudden, you're right. By the way, you went to the Intuit Dome, so it is a great venue.
Yeah,
it's not always full, but
no.
It is.
But they pack the wall. They get a good portion behind the basket.
Cool.
The wall behind the basket is full. They have season ticket holders there that they give them shirts.
The media spot's the opposite side.
Yes.
Right? So I walk up that every time. Yeah. So when you walk up, you'll see there are like 1,000 seats. Half the time, I'm like, should I just sit here in the 4th row? Because there's no one in this row. Then I just keep it moving.
Yeah, it's also LA, so there's that delay for tip time. All right, what else was on your radar from this weekend?
So here's something it was on my radar, and then I dove into the numbers that I just found interesting, and I'll tell you about. I wanted to see the Nuggets 3-point shooting in particular. I know they lost that game we're talking about with the Clippers, but we've discussed the fact they don't have a lot of 3-point shooting. So I just found this interesting. So the year they won that championship, they were only 25th in 3-point shots taken. They were 18th in shots made from the 3-point line because they were really efficient. They were 4th in 3-point efficiency. So they basically didn't take a lot of threes, especially for an NBA championship team. But when they took them, they took good shots and they made those shots. Last year, they were last in the number of 3-point shots taken, and they fell all the way to 10th in 3-point shooting percentage. So like a top 10 shooting team from the 3-point line, but only 25th in 3-pointers made. This year, they are, you know this? They're 3rd in the NBA in 3-point shooting percentage, the Denver Nuggets. They just take so few 3-point shots that they don't make enough. And in this game last night, I think they made 41 or 42% of their shots, but they only made 10. So one of the things that I'm watching, and I did it with the eye of Denver's not evolving. Michael Malone's not evolving. I know they have other issues. They have to take more 3-point shots. And I sort of paused on it because I didn't realize until I looked, they didn't take a lot of 3-point shots the year that they won an NBA championship. But I'm starting to sort of worry that maybe among Denver's problems is the fact that unlike these other teams that are following the Celtics lead and maybe not shooting 53 3-point shots a game, but maybe part of Denver's issue is they are still playing basketball the way they did 2 years ago when they won the whole thing. And the game has evolved pretty quickly where you've just got to be shooting more 3-pointers. They're not.
Yeah,
they are last in the number taken. It's not going to work.
Yeah, well, they were last year too. I mean, they took 24 against the Clippers last night, and you're right. They absolutely need to take more. We talked about this early in the season when we said, they need more from MPJ, especially from deep, right? He took 1 last night. Aaron Gordon came back, by the way, so that's helpful for them. He came off the bench. He'll be reintegrated into the starting lineup sooner rather than later. He took 2. You've got Russell Westbrook. He took the second most. He took 5. That's probably not what you want from him anyway. And then you've got Joker, who that's never really truly been his game, although he's like all the rest of his numbers this season. He's improved as a 3-point shooter. Part of it is a personnel issue, and part of it is exactly what you said, how they play, right? Like Michael Malone has decided that this is the best way to wring efficiency out of that starting 5. And he's been proven right for most of it, but at some point it is a math problem, and you're going to have to catch up on that front.
But to your point, MPJ can shoot 3s.
Yes.
And taking 4 is not enough. Taking 1, you know what it reminds me of? And this is the ultimate insult I can give. And I haven't looked at the Bucks numbers, so I don't know if it's the same. It probably is. But at the end of his Clipper tenure as head coach for Doc Rivers, and during that Philly tenure, those teams were really good at 3-point shooting percentage and took very few 3s. And there was always this gulf between what they could do from the 3-point line and what they would do. And some of that, you talk to people who know and don't like Doc, is Doc, they thought, was still running an offense from his Celtics days, what is basically 10,000 years ago, right? He hadn't evolved. That Michael Malone and the Nuggets are reflecting that same, I think being behind how it's just, I don't know what it means. It's just something I was paying attention to last night.
No, it's important. In a season where the Boston Celtics are going to be probably the first team in NBA history to take more than 50 3-pointers per game, likely to take more 3s than 2s per game.
That's crazy.
The Nuggets average 19 fewer 3s per game than the Celtics. It's like a completely different approach to the same thing. It's really kind of wild.
You can't
it's really kind of wild.
Succeed doing that.
Yeah. All right. One more break. And then on the other side, we will continue with Weekend Radar. This is Beyond the Arc.
At CBS Sports Galazzo Network, we're bringing you the game.
Madness of Messi arrives!
Breaking down the game.
This is unlike anything else in the world.
And changing the game.
Get it all for nil.
That means free.
Whoa.
And all day long!
24/7.
Welcome back to Beyond the Arc. A reminder to find us on YouTube at Beyond the Arc CBS. Please hit the like button, leave a comment, subscribe. There's a little bell symbol. You'll get notified when we go live. We are live Monday through Friday at noon Eastern, so come and join us on YouTube every day. Weekend Radar continues, Bill. What else hit you this weekend?
All right, so again, small sample size. Not sure what to make of it. Don't love bringing it up. But I had noticed that Dallas had been winning games without Clay, and so I was just sort of, they're 4-0 without Clay right now. They're 4-0 without Clay Thompson.
Don't Clay that. Maybe he didn't notice.
Also, like, maybe just it's nice to have Luka out there, right? Luka had a really good game.
Sure.
Maybe just Dallas has kind of figured, but I am a believer, maybe more than others, that single additions and subtractions can make huge impacts to the good or the bad on NBA teams, depending on the sort of fit tactically and how a player's performing and how they get along with their teammates. And I love Klay Thompson as a person and as a guy to root for. I think we all do. I think that's a fairly universal thing, right? And the guy loves boats and he's a super chill dude and his time with the Warriors. I don't have a major takeaway from this, John, but I was paying attention to this over the holidays, that they just keep winning games with Klay out.
Well, while we're mentioning this, I'll tie it into one of mine that was on the radar here, because so they're on the rise. They've won 4 in a row, as you've mentioned, 8 of their last 10. They haven't had Clay, so maybe that means when they come back, they'll be even better because they'll have Clay. But I understand your point here. They are essentially tied with the Golden State Warriors in that 4-5 slot. The Warriors, meanwhile, have lost 4 in a row. And as we said, this part of their schedule is very, very difficult. And it's starting to make me murmur a little bit, because you'd say, hey, if the Warriors lost those 4 games to the Spurs and the Nets and then the Thunder and the Suns, probably Steph didn't play in any of them. Only played in 3 of the 4. So that's not great. My question for you then is, as the Mavericks are ticking up and the Warriors are in a very difficult stretch of their schedule, who do you like better going forward?
So I'll have a better answer for you after this week, because I'm going to the Bay on Wednesday to go to a couple of Warriors games. I'm going to their 2 home games at the end of the week and to talk to people and sort of do some reporting. But I'm still going to answer Golden State. knowing that some of that might be being a captive of the muscle memory of the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years covering the NBA. And I was skeptical of Dallas last year and thought they caught lightning in a bottle, and thought that had been proven correct. And they've won the 4 in a row. They've actually just been good lately, the last couple of weeks, but I still like the Warriors better, but I don't know how much of that is just residually that having been true most of the last decade and me wanting that to be true.
I like the Warriors better too. I think this is just a really difficult stretch of their schedule, and like getting into it with a Spurs Nets loss, and then here come the Thunder and the Suns and the Grizzlies and the Rockets and like all these teams that are really good. Like that's a tough time to catch 2 L's that you probably shouldn't have caught.
And I think one thing that's interesting is Steph Curry saying, I don't know how much if we want to make a big deal of this or not, but talking about the rotation a little bit and seeming to suggest that the celebrated, vaunted 12-man rotation needs to tighten up was something he talked about, maybe needing more consistency. So I'll also be curious, producer Aaron is not the president or a member of the Steve Kerr fan club. It will be interesting to see whether or not that rotation needs to shore up a little bit. Some guys just need to lose minutes. And if so, if Steve Kerr can pull that trigger quickly.
Yeah, and I get it, and I was anticipating that they'd have to tighten it up too. But despite the fact that they've stumbled a little bit here, I was really buying into it, if only because, look, Steph had the ankle issues earlier. Right now, all of a sudden, his knees are flaring up a little bit, and he said, I'm not worried about it, but it is something that I anticipate will have to be managed over the course of the season. Not having to play Steph Curry more than 30 minutes a game and still having a good winning record and being the 4th seed in the Western Conference, like that's a benefit.
I agree. And 100%. And not to take a shot at Steve Kerr, but I guess I'm going to take a shot at Steve Kerr. The only thing that makes me a little worried about that rotation is not the rotation. It's if there's anyone in the NBA whose strength is not rotation management, who's a really good coach, it's Steve Kerr. So it's not just can it work, it's does Steve know how to navigate that proper. Since I'm going out there, I'm going to talk to Steve. Let me say though, I think he'll do a great job. Let me rethink that.
You're gonna have a delightful conversation with him. He's a great conversationalist. While we're talking about head coaches, let me throw one at you. Did you catch any of the Lakers Jazz game yesterday?
I did not catch the Lakers Jazz game.
Okay. All right. Most people didn't. I just was dialed in because it was on. The Lakers stole one in Utah, and I really mean steal one. The Jazz were down 1, and they had a timeout left with like 5 seconds left, and they decided not to call a timeout. Colin Sexton pushes the ball up the court, decides that he's going to take hero ball style and go right to the rim, right? And as he's going to the rim with 1.6 seconds left, he makes what appears to be the game-winning shot, Bill, except for no, taken away because Will Hardy called the timeout as Colin Sexton was hitting the game winner. Like, Will Hardy, what are you doing?
No, that's great. That's great coaching.
If
you don't want to win that game,
timeout. Why didn't you call it when the ball was out of bounds? What are you doing?
Because he's like, oh, bleep, we're going to win the game, and that's not the mandate. Timeout.
Yeah, don't score there. All right,
don't score.
Let's set up a play where you don't score. That's actually a very good point. I hadn't considered that. But yeah, I mean, Will Hardy, like I was screaming at my TV, like, what are you doing? But yes, I hadn't considered that perhaps he had gotten an edict from the front office.
Yeah, Danny was screaming at Sexton, what are you doing? as he was about to score.
But my God, Will, that was like, in all seriousness, that was just like such a bad, confused look. Colin Sexton could not believe it. The look on his face was like, what are you doing to me? What are you doing to us? Very strange. Also from that game, I wanted to throw out, I don't think this is a big deal, but I will mention it. LeBron James had been having one of his great 3-point shooting seasons of his career. He is now 0 for his last 15 from 3.
You know where I'm going with this, right?
Go ahead.
Do you remember we did some, overreactions, and I made a statement where I believe you were here. I think it was you and I, where you lost your mind, and I know Aaron did, producer Aaron, where I said LeBron will not. It was maybe it was Brad. It was some prediction. LeBron's not going to be a top 35 player at the end of the year, and people you would think this guy was. I'm just saying, he's looking. It's really early. It's barely December for LeBron to look like he's having trouble with all the miles as if it were March. I mean,
the rest of his stats
looks
are
old.
outrageous, though.
His stats are outrageous, but he has looked different of late.
What did he do yesterday? Hold on. I think he had like a million assists yesterday. Yeah, he had 14. He had 27 points and 14 assists and 2 blocks.
I'm just saying.
And he just can't get the shot to fall.
I didn't watch yesterday's Lakers game, but the game I have watched the others, and he has looked. You don't think he's looked? I think he's looked older. I think he's looked a little.
I've watched
weathered
a lot of Lakers this year, almost all of the Lakers this year. I would say that this is the first time when I was like, well, no, that's not true. The Bronny game, the first Bronny game where he looked distracted. And then beyond that, I thought like once they got into, especially once they got into Point LeBron, that he's looked really good. It's just the 3-point shot that had been good early in the season is definitely not falling now. And he's pressing it. There was a couple that he took last night where I was like, I think he just is trying to get one to go down.
He doesn't look physically able to me to do what he could do. Now his basketball IQ is amazing and he still facilitates, but he does not look like the guy who even 3 weeks ago, let alone last year, could still just at certain moments of the game, just take over the game. Like, I'm going to play downhill. I'm going to get to the basket. I'm going to create offense. I mean, 14 assists sort of feels like how old LeBron's going to go, right? He's eventually not going to be able to do the things that he did, but he'll be able to create for other guys. And that's great. That's just not like the complete LeBron James that they need. And maybe I'm overreacting. I think, again, I didn't see last night's game. I think yesterday's game, I think he's looked old, man.
Listen, you could get more of this take tomorrow on Overreaction Tuesday.
Save it. Right.
That's it.
Write it down.
What else you got from Weekend Radar?
You already hit this a little bit, but I have it written down that the Magic just keep winning games. And that means that I think we are all destined to have to keep watching this team that cannot score points. They are awesome defensively, and they've got some individual guys, and Franz Wagner in particular has been really, dude, they're a hard watch. I'm trying to watch them more. I was at one of their games. They are and they're winning. They've
100
won
points against the Nets. That was a winner.
6 in a row. There was a winner.
Yeah.
And the Nets, by the way, the Nets need to start losing, and I think that they're aware that they need to start losing. Like, their plan is not to win basketball games, but I know that I know that it's a successful recipe for the Magic, but how about we mix in some offense? Also, you cannot be a contender. You just can't without offense. You have to be good at both. And I know that no one sees the Magic as a team that's going to threaten the Celtics this year, but if your eventual plan with this group is to try and do something more than just surprise everybody and be a top 4 team, I would just mix in the idea of maybe trying to figure out how to score some points. Just 24th.
They are tied with the Warriors for the 6th best point differential. Does that do anything for you?
I mean, it does not, because they are 3rd in defensive rating. They are 23rd in offensive rating. I understand they're so good on defense that their net rating is
challenged.
They're so, and as producer Aaron's pointed out, it's been since 1931 or whatever it is since they had a top.
Yeah. They had 20... peach baskets back then, and
right.
Yeah. No, their offense is problematic. There's no doubt about that. I think that part of that will be buoyed when you get Paolo back, right? I mean, and so far, Franz Wagner, as you pointed out, has really carried a lot of that offensive load, and Jalen Suggs. But yes, beyond that, they don't have a lot, and they are a really tough watch. Something that I flagged, Mikal Bridges, weird year for him, Bill. They traded 5 first-round picks for him, as we know. He looked awesome this past weekend against, we should mention, it's a caveat here, the Pelicans, right? He had 31 points, easily his best offensive game of the season. He shot 7 of 12 from 3, which has been a serious problem for him this season. Overall, though, before the Pelicans game, he was benched in a, for much of the 4th quarter in a 1-point win over the Hornets. And it was the 3rd time down the stretch this season that Tom Thibodeau has benched one of his main guys, one of the guys he's giving serious minutes to, one of the guys that everybody anticipated. Look, nobody thought when they traded all those picks that he was going to come in and be their number 1 offensive option, or even their number 2, right? Because they already had Jalen Brunson, and then they go and get Karl Anthony Towns, and clearly that's what they were thinking about offensively. Defensively, though, especially in crunch time, you're thinking, Mikal Bridges has to be out there. Why would he not be out there? 3rd time he was benched, and again, he bounces back nicely against the Pels, but that's concerning because he's shooting 33% from 3. That's a career worst. He doesn't get to the line. His points per game are down. He had a nice game against New Orleans, but that's just something that popped up on my radar. I'm like, what's going on with Mikal Bridges? He's usually so consistent.
And it's also a concern for the Knicks. So obviously I was in New York, and I talked to some people with the Knicks, and some former Knicks people were out and about. And this was the topic of conversation that came up without even being asked. Is Bridges going to figure it out? Is it a mistake? Is he not? Yeah. And there's not a good answer other than, is there a degree of grace you want to provide considering he's brand new and Cat is brand new and those sorts of additions take time to figure out your role? Because even in a perfect situation, if Bridges is playing at the level he's supposed to, he is what, the fourth most important player on that basketball team after in this order. I think it's Brunson, Cat, OG, and then Bridges, right? So if you go from being the guy on a bad team to something very different on a team that has championship expectations, I suppose maybe we need to give you more of a margin than 20 or 20, the normal 20 or 25 games. Like, this can take time, but I'm with you. He hasn't looked uncomfortable. He's just looked bad for big stretches of games.
It's one thing for the shot not to fall. Like,
right.
Okay. That's a problem in and of itself. But in a close game against the Hornets, you would think, all right, look, Mikal is not getting the three to go. Okay, it doesn't matter because he's so good, or has been so good defensively, that of course he's going to be on the floor. And for Thibodeau to go, no, I'd rather close with Deuce McBride. Okay, that's alarm bells for me.
I'll say this though, with like, one thing about Tibbs is that we joke about how he'll play the same guys like 46 minutes a game, haha, and it's real. That's not just, that's also because when he doesn't trust people, like if he doesn't think you're one of the 5 best players, he doesn't want you out there ever for any so maybe he just doesn't right now think Bridges is in that group, right? Maybe he just, whether it's the offensive output or something else that we're not seeing behind the scenes, or his inability to, I don't know. And I don't know, but Tibbs is the kind of guy that will overreact. And just, if you're out, then you don't get minutes. That's part.
It's something that we noticed. You said as you were in New York, people were talking about it.
Yeah.
It's something that now the Knicks have noticed, because afterwards, Josh Hart kind of went off on the media and was super defending his guy. And I get it. You've been friends with him for a long time, but he was blaming the media to everybody to get off of Mikal Bridges' back. And I was like, all right, you can blame us for noticing it, but your coach was none of us stuck him on the bench. What do you expect?
Josh, I don't work for the Knicks, so it's not my job to pretend that you guys are good when you're not, right? Or that he's playing well when it's a good observation by you, because I was surprised, because when I was at the Nets game, right? And you're going, how this goes. There's people that show up there. I was surprised how many people I was talking to where I'm talking to them about the Nets or the Magic, and they wanted to bring up Bridges. Yeah, no, cool. Yeah, we're doing all right. Have you seen Bridges? I mean, it is the thing. People, that happened twice. Yes.
He really needed that Pels game so bad. Do you have any other weekend radars, or do you want to do?
I've got one just real quickly.
Give me another one.
The Bucks are over 500. They have ridden. I've just been paying attention to this, obviously for reasons what I've written and my love affair with Doc Rivers, and we love each other. But they've gotten to 10-9, and I think that is a really important threshold to get over 500. And their schedule's not awful even now. They got the Pistons, then the Hawks, the Celtics are tough, then the Nets, then the Cavs, but then Wizards, Bulls, Nets, Bulls. I mean, and Pacers. They've got some games in here where they could be, we could go into January 1st and they could be in pretty good shape.
Yeah, this is what we discussed, right? That this was sort of like the soft underbelly of their schedule. And if they were going to get right, this is when they were going to do it. And you mentioned that Pistons game, by the way, the little double dip for the NBA Cup win and in tomorrow. We're going to do our NBA Cup previews tomorrow. But earlier in the season when they were playing terribly and the Sixers were playing terribly, and we were looking at them as hey, which team could bounce back here? On paper, it would have made more sense to pick the Sixers, but all of a sudden Giannis is playing out of his mind right now.
Unbelievable. Is he at MVP level? He's playing at an MVP level. Their team's not good enough.
Yeah, that's why it's just like a bridge too far for me. But yes, and also Joker. Well, Joker's team is sort of night in, night out, depending. Right. But his numbers are kind of undeniable for me. Yes, the Bucks have finally, I don't want to say figured it out, but dug themselves out of the hole that they got into to start the season. Let's do team of the night.
Can we just do the whole weekend?
Yeah.
I'm going Sixers, man. Congratulations.
Why?
They did it. We
They got another win.
We got another one. What are they? 4-14? Let's
They are.
go. Let's
The
go.
only-
I just drew a bill out of you. You did that one.
The
You didn't see
only
it coming.
Philadelphia sports team that I acknowledge is the Philadelphia Eagles, who got a big win over the other birds, the
That
Ravens.
was a good win.
On Sunday. They're 10-2. They look legit. The Sixers, I don't even want to.
You usually have your defensive shield up. I think this one you just went Bill.
I didn't see that one. You kind of hit me from. You know what? I should be prepared. It's kind of like when in a boxing match when they say defend yourself at all times.
Right.
You know, I wasn't prepared there.
I want to sell it to quote office. I want to celebrate their entire catalog. I mean,
I was not prepared for that. I'm gonna go with my actual NBA team, the Los Angeles Clippers, who beat the Nuggets last night, 13-9. They've won 8 in a row at Intuit Dome. 7 seed in the Western Conference. As I mentioned, this is a game where the Nuggets had Aaron Gordon back. Harden almost goes for a 39-point triple-double, which is kind of ridiculous. Norm Powell has been a nice 1A option. I don't think that they're going to do anything significant this year, Bill. I do think I am buying them as a team that's going to be a pain in the ass to play against whenever you draw them on the schedule.
Yeah, no, I think it's a like the Sixers, a well-earned honor. And unlike the Sixers, they've been, as we discussed earlier, this is maybe who they are. They play really hard, and Harden will give you some offense.
Yeah, at the very least, they're not we talk about how the Magic are a tough watch. Clippers, I've watched a ton of Clippers this year. Fun watch.
They are fun. They are fun.
Fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
oddly enjoyable.
I like watching Harden play when it's not. It's interesting to see Harden play again where it's not the detriment to the team. I mean, it's working. Like what he does is working in sort of in partnership with the way that the rest of that squad sort of puts in the work.
No expectation Harden is the best Harden. It's hard to be in Los Angeles, a market this big, and not have a spotlight on you. But they're the second team in the city. Nobody ever remembers about the Clippers, and it's nobody thought the Clippers were going to do anything with Kawhi out this year. They're probably not going to do anything, but they're kind of.
Do you want Kawhi back too? I mean, I hate to say the Kawhi part out loud. I don't know either.
I don't know. That's
it's
something.
Working.
Maybe you know what. Save that for Overreaction Tuesday, which we'll do tomorrow. Write that one down. We're also going to have our NBA Cup previews tomorrow, and then we'll discuss Wolves and Lakers. That's a big one for both of those teams tonight. But for now, for our NBA insider, Bill Ryder, he and I are going to be on CBS Sports HQ and CBS Sports Spotlight today at 3:30 Eastern, so come and join us on that one. And then you can join us tomorrow when we return live at noon Eastern on YouTube. But for right now, thank you for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.